I'd like to, we've had some really good questions, but I'd like to ask a very simple and basic and perhaps remedial question, but nevertheless, I think it needs to be asked. Of the programs that have already been started, and it may be too soon, and in fact, I guess it is for Lacey, but I'm just wondering, there's been some question in our discussions as to whether, in fact, we're seeing any increase in the fraction of renewable energy sources used in the generation of electricity in those CCA programs. Even if we're just talking about the elected rates that, or the elected programs that CCA members would choose, where are we in terms of moving towards the goal, at least a stated goal, of the CCA program as being one way to accelerate our movement towards higher use of renewable energy sources?
So in the case of Lancaster, our minimum renewable supply is 35% renewable sourced. 10 megawatts annually comes from a solar project in Lancaster, and other comes from other renewable sources that are available to us through a procurement process. And then we do offer, or they do offer, a 100% renewable option for customers to pay a premium and opt up. In the case of Pico Rivera, they are offering, or their minimum is 50% renewable sourced renewable energy. So I think CCA certainly across the state are really pushing the increase in renewable demand in the state, which I think is kind of the goal, is to continue increasing the amount of renewable energy used in the state. Because, you know, unless the renewable generation is right here in your community, it's coming off the grid, so you're really increasing the demand for renewable statewide and greening the grid and putting more renewable energy on the grid. So CCAs are really, I think, ahead of the game there. In the state, in Southern California Edison, their most recent power disclosure is they are 28% renewable energy. PG&E and SDG&E, I think, are higher, a bit higher than that currently. So in Southern California Edison, or in Southern California area and Edison territory, the CCAs are much higher than.
And I think by virtue of having the three tiers that we have within LACE, there will be some people who will be at 100%, by their own choice. There will be some that will be at 50% by their own choice. And we don't go below the minimum, so most likely the math will work out that will be something higher than the state minimum, just because that's the way it's going to work. It can only ratchet up, it can't ratchet down. And as the state mandate goes up, then our base tier will go up as well, because we have to meet the state requirements. So we're always assured we're going to be equal to or greater than what the state requirement is. And the key for that really isn't a city council saying we're going to mandate it necessarily. It's individual customers deciding that that's what they want to do. So if there is a big movement to 50% or to 100%, it truly will be a grassroots effort, at least the way the rate structures are set today.
Thank you.
This is the first one that I've attended, and maybe you've shown this before, but I'd like to understand better the billing, what the resident would see. And also, there are certain features that SCE offers, such as if, let's say, you have a device that has to be on all the time, you can just be in tier 1, you get this medical thing. Do those continue?
I'll let Barbara answer, other than the fact that Edison will continue to do the billing. The bill will look the same. It's a bit of an oversimplification. There'll be an extra page in there that will actually be LACE's page. And so when the customer gets the bill, they will have the energy usage at the LACE charges, and that's the charge that they will pay. okay? And so Edison will continue to do everything. They actually, with regard to everything but the energy portion, they will be running the call center to talk about problems of distribution outages and things like that through their call center. So it requires a tremendous amount of cooperation. One of the reasons that LACE is phasing in customer participation is that we have so many customers, their system wouldn't handle all of our customers coming in at one time. So the first tier is the community, the county-owned facilities only. And a part of the reason for that is we don't want to have a billing problem and have it affect a whole bunch of customers. This way, if it happens in the first 6 months, there's only one customer, and that's the county. And so that we don't put other customers at risk. The other part is the sheer volumes that we're going to have. But we've been working with them for 2 or 3 months now on getting prepared to start in January. So they've had real life experiences, but the process I think is pretty much the same.
The special rates offered by Southern California Edison would still be offered and would be no different. It would be the same discount for medical baseline or for care, which is a low-income qualified rate. Those discounts are on the delivery side, the transmission and distribution side of the bill, and those continue to stay the same. And you don't have to reapply, you don't have to do anything. You know, I think the benefits of the way the law was written and the way that it's implemented is that to the average customer, you would not know any different. You know, you would get your bill in the same format. If you're on automatic payment, you're still automatic payment, and the bill looks the same. You flip on your lights, they still come on. You know, you plug in your phone, it's still going to charge at night. And, you know, some of the questions that we got were, well, Lancaster doesn't know anything about managing electricity. Are we going to have more blackouts or brownouts? And, you know, there's no higher risk because the grid is managed by the California Independent System Operators. And so you're not at a higher risk of, you know, not having electricity when, you know, there's an accident or a line is down. It's not the city's responsibility. It's Edison's responsibility. So it is to the average person, there is, and I say average because most people are busy in their everyday lives and they get their bills and they pay them and they don't pay a lot of attention to what's the renewable content and all of that. But with the exception of solar, people who have solar are very in tune to electricity and all of that. So
I think
but-
Fairmont is.
But so there's nothing, you know, that the customer notices from from the front-facing part.
And would Edison be charging the resident, let's say we went with the CCA and then decided to just go back all the way to Edison, is there a back and forth charge?
So if you, when a CCA is created, as was mentioned, the customers automatically become the CCA's customers unless an individual opts out, and they can opt out by calling or by going online, and they have 2 months prior to the launch month and 2 months after. So there's about a 4-month window, or give or take a little bit of time, from which they can make that decision and opt out. After that time, you can still decide to go back to Southern California Edison, but there are restrictions, and those restrictions are put on through Edison's rate tariffs. One of them is that you have to give them 6 months notice, and if a customer gets really mad at the CCA and says, I don't want to wait 6 months, I want to return today, you have to go on to a special rate with them for a period of time, and then you have to stay with Edison for a year. And that's to prevent people from gaming the system of jumping back and forth and thinking they're going to take advantage of rates. That's one reason. The other reason is that whether it's the CCA or Edison, they have to, you know, buy power to make sure that they have the energy for you, and so there has to be that period of time to enable that process to happen. And so those restrictions are in place. And I think Edison charges for you to then eventually come back, you pay a $1, $2 fee or something like that, $1.50. It's a nominal fee. So yeah.
I just wanted to back up one step in terms of the rates and incenting increased renewables, because I think the county, in our case, the county-owned facilities are gonna be phase one. And they have taken an interesting approach. They have given us directions that because the budgets have already been set for all the county departments, rather than generate savings in those accounts, they've instructed us that the first power purchase, which we're about 95% complete with negotiations on, they want to just pay the same amount of money and let the renewables gravitate up to whatever percentage that amount of money will buy. And we're expecting it's going to be something over 60%. So the first block of energy that we're going to deliver is above 60%. They don't have to modify their budgets or anything to take care of that. And so we're kind of, kind of excited about that prospect of getting out in front in terms of the enhancements, and it really isn't going to cost them anything. So you'll be hearing something about that when we get the contract signed, but that's the instructions that we have currently to go out with the first tranche.
That comment kind of touches on a question that I was thinking about. It seems to me it might be very attractive to have people just keep their present rate and at the same time increase the amount of renewables that they are using. And I wondered if under your systems there might be the option of an individual city adopting some option like that.
Well, in the case of becoming an associate member of CCEA, Claremont would be fully in control of that decision and would make that rate-setting decision. We've been finding, and I think Bill's comment about the county municipal facilities is proving that, you can achieve a higher renewable content without it costing any more money. In the case of Pico Rivera, they wanted to increase the renewable, but also provide savings to their citizens, which is why they hit 50% and didn't go higher than that, because they wanted to provide some rate savings. But those would be decisions that Claremont City Council would contemplate and then decide on in their rate setting process.
I think the only limiting factor might be that the Edison's billing system can only accommodate so many rate structures. You can't have 200 rate structures. They bow their neck about that a little bit. At least in our case, we had to argue quite a bit to get to 3, and so they don't. Their system is not state of the art. Let's put it that way, and so it doesn't have a lot of optionality. I hope that's the case that Lancaster has too, but there is a limit to how many options you can provide. But all those things are possible. They can still choose 50% here. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. The comment was they could still get 50% through the LACE, because that will be one of the standard rate offerings.
Yes, I'd like to bring Jennifer back into the conversation here.
Thank you. Jenna, either one.
It's what? Jenna. Okay, hi Jenna. I was fascinated by what you said, that this is getting into kind of a question about the nitty-gritty running of this program, which from the outside seems overwhelming. I mean, we're taking over for Southern California Edison, for God's sakes, right? So, but you said that you are running this program by yourself with an intern, a part-time intern. Did I hear you correctly? And could you just speak to your experience in running this?
So I handle the city's environmental programs as a whole with just myself and an intern. So to take on a CCA, to be like part of the CCEA type of concept would have been too much work for us, and that's why we opted with LACE, because it gave us a voice in the bigger picture type of a thing. And so, I have a lot of great ideas, but it's just me, and with our budget, I mean, we're already at a budget deficit as a city as it is, so to try and take on the upfront costs and things of that nature, and then to maybe even consider bringing in another part-timer, just wasn't feasible for us. And so it made it so that we have a voice still, but it's part of the bigger collective, so sometimes our voice isn't right. We may not have the right ideas, which I think is great because there's a lot of other people who have experience that we can then piggyback off of. My council member is very knowledgeable in this, but she also still listens to me and my ideas, and those get voiced then through her on the board, which is something that I also really liked, was that there's other cities that are starting to join now that I've met with their staff members, and we're all kind of on the same page as staff, and so we get to take that to our council members or whoever the appointment or the director is for the board of directors. And so they get to have this, they represent us, and that actually feels good for me, that she listens to me, but she also can take it just beyond a little bit because she's got years of experience with energy procurement for a very, very large water wholesaler. And so it's nice to have that help and support that I probably wouldn't have if we just hired someone with some base experience in managing a program like this. So that's my take on it. I also want to add too, a little bit on the transportation electrification thing. Edison's programs look at Southern California as a whole, and so what their concepts for research and development aren't necessarily going to benefit cities like myself, South Pasadena, or some of the other cities, just because we don't have certain things. In particular, we don't have heavy-duty transportation that comes through. I mean, with the exception of the grocery store deliveries and things of that nature, but we don't have any ports or hubs. And so for us, that's not a priority. Even medium-duty transportation is still kind of lacking for us. We've got 2 streets that are corridors, but at 3.5 square miles, that's such minimal for us. So for us, our residents are mainly concerned with what they can do more to for transportation electrification. And so that's why I like, whatever CCA concept you go with, it gives you that option to listen to what your residents and your community's needs are. So even if you join with local communities, you have that concept still that what's available nearby will be what you target your public benefit charges towards. And so that's something I wanted to add to that, because we were asked to weigh in a little bit by Edison to the CPUC about their program, and that's what our environmental commission felt was it's great to finally be researching these things and promoting them, but that's not what everyone else needs, and the research and technology isn't always there yet. So we like to be able to focus our money where we want it to go.
Can I make one, give you an anecdotal example of the kind of thing that she's talking about? When I was at the Southern California Public Power Authority, one of the early projects that we dealt with on electrification of transportation was that we took our members who were along the 210 corridor and actually got grant money from the CPUC or from the Energy Commission to put charging stations in Burbank, Glendale, Pasadena, Azusa, Colton, and Riverside, so that they're spaced along that corridor, and we branded them along with the members and used and leveraged that cooperation to get money to fund them all rather than each individual city coming in to get it funded. We bundled them and got 6 of them put in. At 6 times the money. So that's the kind of thing you can do when you're working cooperatively at that level.
I see that we are very close to the Cinderella hour of 8:30 when we're presumably going to be kicked out of here. But could I ask just one last question, unless someone else has a burning question?
You're the chairman.
Well, that's another question. I think if we all elected, and in my own mind this is a possibility, but I think I'm out of touch with reality, but if we all elected to have 100% renewable energy in our fuel mix, I suspect that ISO simply couldn't do it. There isn't storage that would be required to collect wind and solar and so forth and deliver it. Have you worried about this? I mean, are you at all concerned that we might grow, the whole CCA movement might grow so fast and generate so much public interest in achieving and accelerating our progress towards 100% renewable that we might overstep our technological prowess in terms of storage of energy?
That's a great question. So I think one of the things that helps with that is that when the CAISO looks at whether or not you've met your 100% renewable, they're not looking at it on an hour-by-hour basis. They're looking at it as an aggregate basis. So as long as you've procured renewable energy to the level of your, let's say you were only offering 100% renewable and you had, a demand of 500,000 megawatt hours a year. As long as you've purchased 500,000 megawatt hours a year, they're not looking at, well, what time was it delivered, and some of the time you were using conventional and some it wasn't. It looks at it as an aggregate over the course of a year. So that's one thing that helps. But there is so much capacity to build. I think the problem isn't the generating facilities, it's the delivery side, the infrastructure. And I think that's one of the challenges the state's going to have in meeting the goals that the legislature has set is, that the delivery side is going to be challenged with that. But there's plenty of land out in the desert to build solar. It's just can it go anywhere?
Yeah, I think that's right on point in terms of the delivery. You can always build more projects because they're site specific and they're pretty easy to permit nowadays and whatnot. But getting right of ways and permission and environmental reviews of transmission facilities in particular is almost impossible in California. However, there is a lot of debate going on right now as to how much renewable, they're not dispatchable resources, so you usually end up having to overcommit for resources to cover the fact that it might not be blowing here, the wind's blowing over here. It's a very complicated process, and the ISO, even on a real-time basis, looks at resource adequacy. They call it how much reserves are in the system and where is it and what type is it and how fast can it ramp and all that sort of thing. That's being debated all the time, and the question that you ask is very common, and it's almost the policy in California, and it's proved to be okay so far, is sort of the build it and they will come strategy, that if we set a target, we'll figure out how to get it and make the system reliable. And so that's kind of, it's a wing and a prayer, but it's worked. People have been concerned about it for 10 years that I know of, so I don't expect that to change soon.
So, and I guess there's two sides to the coin. One is, are you filling people's electricity demand with renewable energy? But the other side is, what are we doing to reduce the demand? And so are we, self-generating? Are we putting solar on rooftops? Are we being as efficient as we can? Are we reducing the overall electricity usage? And that, by nature, then would increase the percent renewable being used, potentially, right? So it's always, it's kind of like both sides of the coin. Is it a revenue or is it an expense? So with CCA, you can look at both sides. You can reduce the energy usage, and so people are worried about, or not worried, but a goal of most CCAs is savings. Well, you can achieve savings by setting lower rates, but you can also make a bigger impact by reducing the amount of customers' bills by reducing the energy usage. And I think you can have a larger impact on their savings by reducing the amount of electricity they're using, by providing energy efficiency programs and helping low income with solar on their rooftops by either a subsidy or bringing in a program that can help put that on, helping multifamily, projects with renewable programs. So there's a completely different way of looking at it than just, are we buying 100% renewable?
Just one thing to keep in mind also, we talk about, how arduous and such a large task it was to get California to where it is today. And you heard that most of the utilities statewide, I think it's less than 30% right now. That means that over 75% of the mix is not renewable today, and look at how much effort we've put into getting to where we are. It's going to be a monumental effort to get to 50%, 75%. I mean, the work has only just begun. It's not going to be easy. Fortunately, renewable costs have been coming down, which makes it more viable. Otherwise, we may have priced ourselves out of the market. Maybe we couldn't afford it. But today, with technology advancements, PV systems are half of what they were 5 years ago or 4 years ago, or maybe even less. So we're riding the right side of the wave, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
I handed it to you when it was off.
That's cheating. I'm going to cheat too and ask one more question. If we found ourselves in a position where we were generating almost all our electricity locally, and wanted to take advantage of that. Would there be any difference between the Los Angeles and the Lancaster systems in the way we might price it, or just take advantage of what we've done?
So I guess one of the reasons that Lancaster even started down the path of looking at community choice aggregation, because at the time there was no agency in Southern California looking at it, is that our mayor had the goal of being the first net zero city in the world. You're not happy with the state or the country, he wants to be the first one in the world. So in support of that, we adopted the ordinance to require solar on rooftops. We partnered with BYD, who is builds the electric buses, but they're really a battery company, and KB Homes, and built the first net zero home, demonstration home. And we streamlined the development process for solar development in the city, and did a number of different activities towards that goal. But it's so difficult to achieve, get to the point where you're, generating more power than you're using. And CCA is critical in achieving that goal, because then you control the source of the energy, but you also now have a revenue stream to do programs to reduce the use of energy that then will also help to sway that balance and increase the renewable. I'm not sure if you could, in a community, generate enough renewable energy to meet the demands. I think it's a great goal, and I think it's something that we should all be achieving, but the reality of getting there, I think, would be really, really difficult. I think battery storage will help, but the price of batteries really needs to come down to make that an economic, viable, option.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming out. And those of you that have ballots, I think I made a mistake in including South Pasadena in one of those options, but please, if you have a thought about what you would prefer, and it'll be very interesting to see how much unanimity there is in this. And once again, I think it was exceptionally gracious of 4 people to come out here and discuss this with us for Claremont, and we really appreciate it. Thank you.